The Republican Party only makes up about a quarter of all registered voters, not even to mention, non-registered. Within that party, there's various policies, and most only appeal to like a certain percentage of the Republican voters. We know this based on like boos and cheers last night. So aren't we taking what is basically a really fringe policy, but regardless of which one you want to talk about, the Muslim ban or the carpet bombing or the crackdown or the NSA, aren't we taking a policy basically supported by maybe 10% of the country and then making it mainstream? Because all we're talking about is this Republican race for months now. Peter?
There's certainly an element of that, and the candidates certainly aren't afraid to play to that what we call a fringe group. But I suspect that the majority of Americans pull bits of truth, their version of truth, out of this. And so if you say, should we carpet bomb the Muslims everywhere? I mean, I think a lot of Americans rationally will say, no, that's not a good idea. But, we really should fight ISIS harder. And nobody says, oh, my God, we should agree with Donald Trump in Middle America. We better ban all the Muslims. But yet, every time it sort of happens, there's still this little mini groundswell of saying, well, we should do something about our immigration. Tighten things up or whatever. So I suspect there's more people that support these concepts, even though they're still smart enough to realize we can't build we're not going to build a physical wall across the Mexican border or what have you. That's the part that's always scary about demagogues like these guys is there's people who kind of quietly agree with them, and there's a larger group of people who just sit back passively. I mean, if you want to go back and look at Hitler, I mean, how many Germans actively supported, the idea of creating death camps and trying to do that? But, how many Germans were kind of mildly anti-Semitic, or how many Germans were quietly saying, well, I wouldn't do it quite that way, or I don't want to get involved, but maybe not the worst thing if we clear out some of the Jews.
To be fair, with that example, Hitler did win his election. God forbid if one of these guys does.
Yeah, they did burn down the Reichstag at one point, and they did a couple of other less electoral type things. But the argument is on how
just a tough campaign is all that is. Tough campaign.
Yeah, I mean,
there was a number that actively supported him.
Oh, I understand, but I mean, I don't know how many of those people, if they held a referendum on the Holocaust, would have voted yes or no. The point being that while there's a fringe group who literally thinks the way Donald Trump thinks, and we should literally build a wall, and we literally should ban Muslims, and we literally should assassinate their families, drone strikes on wedding parties. The idea is that there are far too many people, I think, who kind of tag along and say, it's a little extreme, but the concept is good. And that helps these folks succeed. That's how they do get into positions of authority, whether they're elected or appointed or just kind of set themselves up in that way. Don't forget.
I think we're missing a big point, though. Before you move on, I think what you're missing is that there are the Republicans who are fervent and sharing every conservative meme they can on Facebook. But I think what you need to look at is sort of what the conservative media landscape is like. Because, you have the majority of your Republican Party in the House is, they may be a little extreme on the guns or abortion or the typical social issues, but, they don't think they should shut the government down over Obamacare. They don't think that just because something isn't ideologically pure, it should be completely disregarded. That is a small group that, I called them, what did I call them? The Crazy Caucus or something, I don't know, but they have some sort of name. I don't remember what it is now. The Freedom Caucus, those guys. Yeah, the Freedom Caucus. But those guys are a small group, but they've hijacked the entire narrative of the Republican Party. And the reason that they have is because most of the conservative talk radio guys, your conservative blogs, and even to Bill O'Reilly and Sean Hannity on Fox News, which is more establishment, but still pitches to that sort of paranoid demographic that, the country needs to be taken back. And I think that's what they're seeing now is the monster is self-aware. It is now sentient, and they cannot control it anymore. And that is why we have Trump, and that is why we have Cruz, and that's why we have, Ben Carson, who wants to, send thousands of people into the Middle East, but please don't destroy the historic grain silos. That alone should have disqualified it. Think what William Buckley, George, what's his name? The guy, the father, Goldwater. They would have choked Ben Carson to death with their bare hands if he was the front runner saying shit like that, because the Republican Party was supposed to be the intellectual party 40 years ago, 50 years ago. Now they look at intelligence like they're afraid of it, like it's insulting. And so when someone like Rubio or Kasich or somebody says something sort of intellectual and measured, sounds a little gay to them. So they're going to go with the guy who would date his own daughter if she wasn't his daughter and he wasn't married.
Like a high school bully.
Yeah, that's a good point. We all would kill baby Trump. I think we could agree on that. But
Or at least
I would not fight 100 baby Trumps. I would not fight him. 100 baby-sized Trumps. Not going to do
That's
it.
a terrifying visual.
Yeah, but I think Josh's point about the right-wing media is very, very important, because this is the single element, I think, that separates today's fear-mongering demagogues from their forefathers, going all the way back to baby Hitler. Imagine someone like Hitler who had access to global media to amplify every statement that he made. Imagine his ability to radicalize others. And that's what this right-wing media is. Josh also correctly points out, I suspect Latest.com's readership skews a little left of center. Certainly, I don't think we have too many of the extreme right people. If they are, they already know this. But if you take a dip into the dark, sticky corners of the internet, Fox News looks rational and intellectual. There are some real crazy stuff out there that is really part of this process of inflammation, if you will. And there's a loop where those crazy people say the things that nobody else wants to say out loud, and then it kind of filters through the system to mid-level people like Alex Jones, who has the talk radio station. He's kind of current Rush Limbaugh for those older people. And then it ends up on Fox, where it's tidied up a little bit for a broader consumption. And I guess to
and they do that. Some people are saying, and that's how they get around reporting the bullshit, because they're reporting on the conversation.
But to go back and support my own statement earlier by agreeing with myself, I would say that is in fact allegorical to this idea that 10% of the Republican Party are completely insane right-wing nutcases. But I argued that there were people in the middle who sort of take bits and pieces out of that argument. I think the analogy is, or it may not even be an analogy, is there. You've got 10% of the conservative population who reads only the conspiracy websites and listens only to the most extreme talk radio. You've got a bigger group that listens to middle-of-the-road nutcases like Alex Jones, and then you've got a lot of people who get the same messages cleaned up for them by Fox News. And that is an amplification tool that manages the message very effectively for each sort of subgroup within the Republican sphere, and makes it very, very effective. The last point, and then I will take a short breath, is that none of those people we saw on the stage last night is going away. One of them will probably drag Hillary through the general election, but the rest of them are just going to hang around. They're going to head think tanks or go to conservative universities, or God help us, end up as commentators on Fox or elsewhere. Their ideas are not going to go away, even when they get kicked out of the primaries.
I I agree with both of you, and Josh made a really good point. This is the monster that Fox News has created to the point where it's basically now gone beyond what Fox News is comfortable with. And when you look at a debate last night, I mean, those people, sure, a couple of them you would call fringe Republicans, but as a whole, they represent the mainstream Republican Party. They are the nominees or whatever. Why was the debate even on CNN if this is the Republican Party today? Shouldn't these debates be on like Breitbart or Newsmax or the Daily Caller? ABC Radio hosted by Rush Limbaugh?
Well, no, because then they would lose a little bit of credibility. By putting it
They
on CNN,
should.
they can argue. No, they should be, of course, but by putting them on the left networks or whatever you call CNN, it shows that they're being asked questions from somebody who's quote-unquote unbiased in some sense, even though, bias still exists. So they're just doing the safe thing by saying at least they were against the person who's supposed to be hard on them. Because if it was Breitbart, you know that the questions would just be coddling all the time. It would get a little crazier, but yeah, I guess that would be better for us then. Maybe they wouldn't get elected.
Well, those are the people they're trying to appeal to, right, Josh? I mean, why even
But
bother
they're not
with
the
this?
majority, unfortunately. At least we hope.
Well, now, again, this is the civil war for the Republican Party that we've been talking about since Obama was elected, and it's been quietly fought. The small size, like the smaller in numbers size, seems to be winning. If you look back at the way this race was supposed to go pre-Trump, you had Reince Priebus, or as Ben Carson calls him, Reince Pubis, coming out and saying that, the Republican Party we're going to get younger. We're going to draw in Hispanics and other minorities, and we're going to be a big tent party. And Jeb Bush came out as the presumptive front runner, talking about immigration as an act of love and being very more toned down. And that is a winning strategy for a general election. But it can't happen because the primaries are this, dogfight of ideological purity. I mean, again, just 2 years ago, Eric Cantor, the second in line for the speakership, like he was going to be the speaker this year, was primaried out for an economics professor who, says God talks to him or whatever crazy shit he said that won him. But I mean, so they have to figure out how to campaign and do that in a way that can get the larger percentage of independents and moderate Republicans who don't typically vote in your primaries and your state and midterm elections. And I don't know how you do that. Well, actually, I do know how you do that. We saw how you do it. You make everybody fucking scared that World War III is at our feet. I mean, that's the thing that they think will bring us together. I thought it was abortion. When the Planned Parenthood stuff came out, I thought that was going to be the cause they'd try to rally around. But I think they're going back to the old standards. Terrorism and Democrats can't keep you safe. And that's why we saw the debate we saw last night.